Today, we're diving into a world that completely solved one of our oldest problems: how to know what's real. But as they found out, the price for absolute truth was way, way higher than anyone ever could have guessed. So just think about that for a second. What would you do? I mean, really, what happens when you can't trust anything? Not the art you love, the phone in your pocket, not even the food you eat. This isn't just some philosophical question. It's the real-world crisis that sparked the incredible changes we're about to explore. All right, so here's our roadmap. We're going to start with the crisis of authenticity to see how bad things got. Then, we'll look at the incredible solution, the atomic fingerprint. After that, we'll meet the new keepers of truth, see how their world became divided by matter. And finally, we'll tackle the heavy stuff, the burden of verification. Okay, so let's jump in. To really get why the solution was so revolutionary, you have to understand the problem. You have to understand the absolute chaos of what they called material anarchy. This quote right here, it just nails it. This was so much bigger than just a few fakes and forgeries. The real issue was that digital records, the proof of everything, had become so easy to change that the very idea of an object having one true history, it just disappeared. The connection between a thing and its story was completely, totally broken. And the end result was this: material anarchy. Just try to picture it, a complete and total breakdown. You couldn't buy a house, you couldn't sell a car, you couldn't even pass down a family heirloom because there was literally no way to prove it was real. Everything just stopped. But out of that total mess came this beautifully elegant solution: the atomic fingerprint. It was a technology that promised to fix everything, not by trying to patch up the broken digital world, but by going straight to the source, to the atoms themselves. And this is the key: atomic provenance. The whole idea is that every single physical object has its own unique atomic structure, a fingerprint for matter that's impossible to copy or fake. So if you can read that fingerprint, you can just bypass all the corrupted digital nonsense and get the truth directly from the object. It's an identity that absolutely cannot be corrupted. The tech that pulled this off was called the Alethian Protocol. And it's actually pretty simple when you break it down. First, you scan the object, which reads its atomic structure without damaging it. Second, the system uses that data to generate a totally unique, unforgeable digital ID. And finally, step 3, it registers that ID on a decentralized ledger, locking it in forever. So boom, the problem of truth is solved. But what happens to a society when you change something that fundamental? Well, that brings us to the new keepers of truth. Because when you change who gets to verify reality, you change who has all the power. And the shift was massive. In the old world, power belonged to the people who controlled the money: bankers, financiers. But in this new order, power swung over to what they called the veracity guilds. These were the technicians, the people who actually ran the scanners. All of a sudden, value wasn't about money anymore. It was about verifiable authenticity. Truth itself literally became the new currency. But this revolution didn't exactly create a paradise. In fact, it created a new and deeply divided world. A society that wasn't split by money or social class, but by matter itself. And this division was a hard line. On one side, you had legacy matter. That's everything made before the new system. It's all suspicious, unverified, practically worthless. They even called them ghost objects. And on the other side, you have attested matter, which is verified, incorruptible, and incredibly valuable. The entire physical world was suddenly split into two: the trusted and the untrusted. This basically created a new caste system. If you were wealthy, you could afford to live in what they called fully attested environments, where every single thing around you was verified. Everyone else, well, they had to take their chances in a world of untrusted legacy matter. And here's the wild part: it actually slowed down the economy. Trade was no longer limited by how fast you could ship something, but by how fast you could scan it. And that leads us to our final and maybe most important point: the burden of verification. What's the psychological toll? What does it do to the human mind to live in a world of absolute, provable truth? And this is where we see the true cost. For everyone, the default mindset became just intense skepticism. Think about that. The very idea of simply trusting someone, of taking them at their word, became obsolete. Every single interaction, every object, it all needed proof. The source calls this a perpetual friction, this exhausting mental tax of constantly having to verify reality. And that's the great paradox of this whole world. They did it. They built a society with perfect physical integrity where nothing could be fake. But in exchange, they gave up the ability to just trust. They were left with this constant nagging doubt that could only be quieted by the beep of a scanner. Which leaves us with a pretty heavy question for our own time, doesn't it? As we're dealing with more and more sophisticated deepfakes, AI, and just endless misinformation, this problem doesn't feel so fictional anymore. So I'll leave you with this to think about. How are we going to prove what's real?